My name is Sarah. I am 32 years old, and my heart was pounding so hard against my ribs, I thought it might shatter them right there in the middle of that opulent ballroom. "Clean it on your knees," the rich woman yelled at me, her voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers and silencing the room of 300 elite guests. It was a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. All eyes suddenly pinned on me, the woman in the simple black uniform and stained white apron. A glass of expensive red wine had shattered on the imported marble floor, a mess I hadn't even caused, but Mrs. Eleanor Harrington, a 55-year-old socialite with a reputation as sharp as her diamond rings, had decided I was the perfect target for her rage. She pointed a manicured finger at the dark puddle, her face twisted in disgust, treating me like I was less than human, dirt beneath her expensive designer heels.
The humiliation burned hot in my cheeks, a suffocating heat that made my hands shake. I could feel the pitying stares, the whispers starting to ripple through the crowd. I was supposed to just take it, to drop to my knees and scrub while she towered over me. But the fire in my chest wasn't just embarrassment. It was a decade of hard work and self-respect boiling over. I looked at the floor, then up at her smug face. And that was the exact moment I realized I didn't have to play this role anymore. To understand how I ended up in that humiliating position, you have to understand where I came from. I wasn't born into money. For years, I worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, saving every spare dollar to build my own catering business, Emerald Elegance. The only person who truly understood my struggle was my younger sister, Emily. She is 29 years old, and she quit her comfortable corporate job to help me run it. We started small, driving rented vans, carrying heavy tables, and cooking the food ourselves. There were times when we would finish a 14-hour shift smelling like stale grease, laughing in the van because we were so exhausted we had lost our minds. But slowly, our reputation grew. We went from backyard parties to high-end charity galas. By the time I turned 31, Emerald Elegance was one of the most sought-after catering companies in the city, and I was the CEO of a thriving business. That brings us to Mrs. Eleanor Harrington. Securing the catering contract for the annual Harrington Gala was considered the holy grail for a business like mine. When Emily told me they requested a tasting, we celebrated like we had just won the lottery. But when Eleanor finally came to our kitchen, I knew instantly she was going to be difficult. She walked in carrying a handbag that cost more than my first car, looking around our spotless commercial kitchen as if it were a disease-ridden alleyway. During the tasting, she criticized everything and spoke to me as if I were a slow-witted servant. "I suppose this is the best one can expect from a local startup," she sighed. Despite her complaints, she signed the contract. After she left, Emily grabbed my arm. "Sarah, I have a bad feeling about this. That woman is toxic." I brushed off her concerns, blinded by the prestige. I had no idea what I was walking into. The week leading up to the gala was pure chaos. We had a massive team ready to go, but disaster struck. 2 days before the event, a severe flu swept through our staff. By the morning of the gala, 5 of my best servers and 2 of my cleaning crew were violently ill. Finding trained event staff on a few hours' notice is impossible. "We are short-staffed, Sarah," Emily said in defeat. "Eleanor is going to destroy us." I made a split-second decision. "I'll do it," I told her. "I'll put on a uniform, I'll serve, I'll bus tables, I'll clean to save this event." Emily tried to talk me out of it, but I didn't care about my title as CEO. I found a spare server's uniform, a simple black button-down shirt, black slacks, and a stark white apron. I tied my hair back, devoid of makeup. When we drove to the sprawling Harrington estate, I was treated like a ghost, just another nameless worker meant to stay invisible. As soon as we started unloading, Eleanor descended upon us like a hawk. She marched over to Emily, ignoring me completely. "Where is the owner?" she demanded. Emily didn't miss a beat. "Sarah is managing things behind the scenes, Mrs. Harrington." Eleanor huffed. "Well, ensure these workers don't track dirt into my home. I don't want my guests having to look at the help." I bit the inside of my cheek and kept my head down. By 8 o'clock, the gala was in full swing in the breathtaking ballroom. It was a war zone for me. I was constantly on the move, carrying trays, sweeping up dropped napkins, my feet throbbing, and my white apron smudged. I blended in perfectly with the rest of the staff. Nobody said thank you when I handed them a drink.
But the event was a massive success. The guests were raving about the food. Pride swelled in my chest, despite the exhaustion. My company was delivering magic. But Eleanor Harrington was never satisfied. Throughout the night, I watched her patrol the room, finding tiny, insignificant things to complain about. She berated one of my young servers for breathing too heavily while pouring water. She snapped at a bartender for putting one too many ice cubes in a drink. She was a dark cloud moving through the party, looking for someone to strike with her lightning. I actively tried to avoid her, staying on the opposite side of the ballroom, focusing on my tasks. But in a room of 300 people, paths are bound to cross. The incident happened just after 10 o'clock. The main courses had been cleared, and we were preparing for the dessert service. I was walking out of the kitchen doors, balancing a large silver tray loaded with empty plates and half-empty wine glasses. I was careful, my eyes scanning the crowd to navigate through the sea of people. That's when I saw a man, clearly heavily intoxicated, stumbling backward. He wasn't looking where he was going. He was waving his arms, telling a loud story, and he backed right into my path. I tried to stop. I tried to pivot, but I was boxed in by a heavy decorative table on my right and a group of women on my left. I braced for impact. The man crashed into me hard. I managed to keep the heavy tray from falling by sheer willpower, twisting my body to absorb the shock. But the sudden movement caused a nearly full glass of dark, heavy red wine to tip over the edge of the tray. It fell in slow motion. I watched it tumble through the air, the crimson liquid spinning out of the glass before shattering loudly onto the pristine imported white marble floor. The sound of breaking glass cut through the chatter of the room like a gunshot. The string quartet stopped playing. The laughter died. 300 heads turned to look at the source of the noise. And there I stood, holding the tray, the red wine seeping into the grout of the marble. The intoxicated man who had bumped into me didn't even apologize. He just looked at the mess, muttered something under his breath, and quickly melted into the crowd, leaving me alone to face the music. I immediately knelt down, pulling a clean towel from my belt, trying to soak up the wine before it stained the porous stone. My heart was racing. Accidents happen in catering all the time, but in a room this quiet, under these lights, it felt like a monumental disaster. I was wiping up the glass when I heard the sharp, rhythmic clicking of heels approaching. It was a fast, angry sound. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and Eleanor Harrington marched through, her face flushed with absolute fury. She stopped right in front of me, looking down at the broken glass and the red puddle. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask if I was okay or if I had been cut by the glass. She just saw a worker making a mess in her perfect house and wanted to punish someone. "What in God's name have you done?" she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. I looked up, still holding the soaked towel. "Ma'am, a guest bumped into me and the glass fell. I am cleaning it up immediately," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted to fix it and move on. But Eleanor wanted a scene. She wanted a target. "A guest bumped into you? You clumsy, incompetent fool. You were probably not looking where you were going. Do you have any idea how much this floor costs? It's imported Italian marble, you idiot. You've ruined it." Her voice was rising, echoing across the silent ballroom. Every single guest was watching. I could feel their eyes burning into me. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. "I apologize, Mrs. Harrington. I will ensure it is thoroughly cleaned and sanitized," I replied, standing up straight to look her in the eye. That was my mistake. I didn't shrink away from her. "Don't you dare stand up and look at me while my floor is covered in filth," she screamed, her face turning a blotchy red. She pointed a trembling, diamond-clad finger at the floor. "Get back down there. Clean it on your knees," the rich woman yelled at me, the words slicing through the air like a whip. "Get on your hands and knees and scrub until my floor is spotless. And when you are done, you are going to pack your things and get out of my house. I will be withholding the payment for your entire useless company." The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked around the room. I saw faces of shock, faces of pity, and a few faces of quiet amusement. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody defended me. They just watched, waiting to see the servant drop to her knees and beg for forgiveness. I felt a cold sweat break out on my palms. The humiliation was so profound that for a split second, my vision actually blurred. A million thoughts raced through my mind in that agonizing silence. I remembered the nights I cried over unpaid bills. I remembered the blisters on my hands from scrubbing pots in that diner. I remembered the sacrifices Emily made to help me build this company. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much blood, sweat, and tears to be treated like a dog by a woman whose only accomplishment was marrying into a trust fund. If I dropped to my knees now, if I accepted this public degradation to save the contract, I would be betraying myself.
I would be telling every single person in this room that my dignity had a price tag, and it didn't. The fear that had been gripping my chest suddenly vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The panic receded, and a profound sense of power washed over me. I wasn't just a server. I wasn't a nameless, faceless maid. I was Sarah, the creator and owner of the company that was currently feeding these people the best meal of their lives. I didn't drop to my knees. I stood perfectly still, looking at the spilled wine, and then I slowly looked back up at Eleanor's furious face. She was panting slightly, expecting me to crumble, but I didn't. Instead, I reached behind my back and calmly untied the knot of my stained white apron. The fabric slipped loosely around my waist. I pulled it over my head, folded it neatly over my arm, and dropped the soaked towel onto the silver tray. Eleanor looked confused, her brow furrowed. "What are you doing? I told you to clean that up. Are you deaf as well as stupid?" she demanded. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders, and when I spoke, my voice was steady, loud, and crystal clear. It carried across the entire ballroom, reaching the ears of every single guest. "No, Mrs. Harrington, I am not deaf, and I am certainly not stupid, but I am also not going to clean your floor on my knees. I am not going to accept your abuse for another second of this evening." Eleanor gasped, taking a dramatic step back as if I had physically struck her. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? You are fired. I will call your manager right now and ensure you never work in this city again." I couldn't help it. A small, dry smile touched the corners of my mouth. "You don't need to call my manager, Mrs. Harrington," I said, my voice ringing with absolute authority. "You can speak directly to me. My name is Sarah. I am the founder, CEO, and sole owner of Emerald Elegance Catering." The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. The murmurs erupted instantly. People were whispering, pointing, leaning in to hear every word. Eleanor's face drained of color. She looked from me to the apron in my hand and back to my face. The realization hit her like a freight train. The clumsy servant she had just publicly humiliated and ordered to her knees was the highly respected businesswoman she had been bragging about hiring all week. You are the owner?" she stammered, the arrogance rapidly deflating from her posture. "Why are you wearing that uniform?" I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. I wanted her to look me in the eye. "I am wearing this uniform because my company was short-staffed due to a sudden illness, and I will do whatever it takes to support my team and deliver on my promises. I don't care about titles. I care about hard work and respect. Two things you clearly know absolutely nothing about." Eleanor tried to recover, trying to muster her haughty demeanor. "Well, this is highly unprofessional. You still made a mess, and I demand—" I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. "You don't demand anything from me anymore. You just threatened to withhold payment from my company after we provided you with exceptional service. You attempted to strip me of my dignity for an accident I didn't even cause. We are completely done here, Mrs. Harrington." I turned my back on her, a gesture of absolute dismissal, and pulled the small two-way radio from my belt. I pressed the button, my voice echoing not just in the earpieces of my staff, but in the silent ballroom. "Emily, this is Sarah. Halt all service. Tell the kitchen to stop plating the desserts. Pack up the equipment, load the vans. We are leaving right now." I released the button. The silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor panicked. "You can't do that. We haven't had dessert. You have a contract," she shrieked, her composed socialite facade completely shattered. She was now just a desperate woman throwing a tantrum. I turned back to her one last time. "You breached that contract the moment you threatened not to pay us and created a hostile work environment. Keep the deposit. You're going to need it to hire someone to clean your floor."
I didn't wait for her response. I dropped the stained apron right onto the puddle of spilled wine and walked away. As I walked through the crowd, an incredible thing happened. The guests actually parted for me, not with disgust, but with a strange kind of awe. A few people even offered sympathetic smiles. They had witnessed the entire exchange, and they knew exactly who was in the wrong. I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, where my staff was already springing into action. Emily ran up to me, her eyes wide. "Are you okay? What happened? I heard everything on the radio." I grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight. "I'll explain in the van. Let's just get our people out of this toxic house."
My team was incredible. They moved with military precision. Within 20 minutes, we had packed up every piece of our equipment, every leftover ingredient, and loaded it into the vans. We left the Harrington kitchen spotless, a stark contrast to the mess Eleanor had made of her own gala. We didn't look back as we drove out of those massive wrought iron gates into the night. Sitting in the passenger seat of the catering van, the adrenaline finally began to wear off. The silence of the dark road was a sharp contrast to the chaotic screaming in the ballroom. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I squeezed my eyes shut, taking deep, shuddering breaths. Emily, driving beside me, reached over and put her hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, you did the right thing," she said softly. "I am so proud of you. I've never seen anyone stand up to Eleanor Harrington like that."
I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, staring out at the passing streetlights. I just couldn't do it, Em. I couldn't kneel. If I had, I would have lost everything I built inside myself. We drove back to our headquarters in silence. We unloaded the vans, paid the staff for their full shifts, and locked up the building. When I finally got home to my small apartment, I fell onto my bed without even taking off my uniform, exhausted to my very core and worried. I woke up the next morning with a pit in my stomach. Standing up for myself felt good in the moment, but the reality of business is rarely kind to those who make waves. I fully expected Eleanor to launch a campaign to destroy my reputation. I walked into the office at 8 a.m. expecting a disaster. Instead, I found Emily staring at her computer screen, her mouth hanging open. "Sarah, you need to see this," she said, pointing a trembling finger at the monitor. It wasn't an angry email from Eleanor. It was a local news blog, and the headline made me gasp. "Elite caterer walked out on Harrington Gala after hostess demands she scrub floor on her knees." Someone at the party had recorded the audio of the entire confrontation on their phone and sent it to the press. The audio clip was everywhere. It was spreading across social media like wildfire. Thousands of people were tearing Eleanor Harrington apart. They called her an elitist bully, an out-of-touch monster. The praise for me was overwhelming. People were applauding my dignity, my dedication to my staff, and my refusal to bow down to toxic wealth. But the real shock came when the phone started ringing. It wasn't clients calling to cancel. It was new clients. People who had been at the gala, people who had tasted our food and witnessed the drama firsthand, were calling to book us. A prominent tech CEO who had been in the front row during the confrontation called personally. "I want a caterer with a backbone," he told Emily. "Book us for our corporate retreat next month." The viral incident gave us a level of exposure that millions of dollars in marketing could never buy. We had to hire 10 new full-time staff members just to keep up with the demand. Emily and I moved our operations into a massive, state-of-the-art facility. We were no longer just a local catering company. We became the premier event service in the state. It was the ultimate vindication for us. The fallout for Eleanor Harrington was swift and brutal. In the world of high society, reputation is currency, and hers was completely bankrupt. The audio recording exposed the ugly truth behind her polished facade. Several major charities publicly announced they would no longer associate with the Harrington family, moving their annual galas to different venues. Her wealthy friends, terrified of being guilty by association, began declining her invitations. She became a social pariah in the very circle she used to rule. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to sue the news outlet that leaked the audio, but the case was thrown out. The damage was done. The woman who had tried to humiliate me, who had tried to force me to scrub her floor on my knees, had ended up scrubbing her own reputation and failing miserably. The justice of it all felt surreal, proving that eventually arrogance and cruelty always find a way to destroy themselves from the inside out. Looking back at that night, I realized it was the defining moment of my life. It wasn't about the money or the business or even the spilled wine. It was about recognizing my own worth. For so long, I had conditioned myself to swallow my pride, to accept poor treatment as just the cost of doing business. I believed that because I came from nothing, I had to tolerate everything. Eleanor Harrington and her cruelty accidentally gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive. She pushed me so far into a corner that I had no choice but to fight back and realize my own strength.
I learned that dignity is not something that can be given or taken away by a wealthy client. It is something you hold inside yourself, and it is entirely up to you whether you surrender it or defend it. I chose to defend it, and I implemented a strict respect clause in all our contracts moving forward. We never allowed anyone to treat our staff as anything less than human beings ever again. Today, when I walk into a ballroom to oversee an event, I don't hide in the shadows. I walk with my head held high, proud of the empire Emily and I built from scratch. I still wear an apron sometimes because I will never be too important to help my team, but I wear it as a badge of honor, not a symbol of servitude. The scars of those early, desperate years are still there, but they are reminders of the fire I walked through to get here. I refuse to let someone else dictate my value, and it changed the trajectory of my entire life. So I leave you with this thought. When someone tries to force you to your knees, do you have the courage to stand up and show them exactly who you are? Would you do the same in my place? Think about it. Until the next story.